married a psychopath in a cult because a prophet said that God was giving me to him. And if you know the lore, it is crazy, but essentially this prophet got my information off of Facebook and he used that information to act like he was hearing from God. So he called out where I worked and called out the relationship that I was currently in. And a lot of developments have been happening lately. So I want to do kind of a recap video real quick. I'll do it as quickly as possible because I do think that y'all need to understand the context to understand how insane this statement is that the cult just put out. If you've ever heard of Bethel music, you know who I am talking about. So we can disagree on if this thing is a cult. A lot of people don't think it's a cult. A lot of people very much think it's a cult. I am in this sector over here, but essentially it is culty at the very least. So what's the deal with Bethel and what do they believe? They are a church out in Redding, California. Although they really do have a worldwide ministry, they put all their sermons on there on Bethel TV, and they have their music industry. Now, they are very big into signs, wonders, and healing, and prophecy. Essentially, Bethel believes that it is our job to bring heaven to earth right now. So we should not wait until we get to heaven to see all of these crazy miracles. It should be happening now, and literally every single person who is saved has the ability to access all of these gifts. So I joined their school when I was 18 years old, and it is called Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry. I have an entire series about Bethel on my page if you guys are interested, but essentially I went out to this school when I was 18 years old. There were, I think, about 1,200 students in first year, 500 students in second year, and it is a 3-year program with your third year being an internship. And they have some very interesting beliefs. Like I said, they believe in prophecy. So they believe that God is always talking. So they would literally put us in front of people and say, give them a prophetic word right now. And if you are not hearing something, you need to listen harder because God is always talking and God always has a word for whoever is in front of you. They believe this so much that on our first day of school, Chris Valton, one of the leaders of the school, came out and told us to prophesy over the person next to us. And I had no idea how to prophesy, so I literally just made something up, and it was a very awkward icebreaker. And then after we did that, he said, if you feel like you got it wrong, congratulations. I want everybody to commit to getting it wrong 3 times this year. So it was this very self-helpy, don't afraid to be wrong. But you should be afraid to be wrong about prophecy and giving directional words to people. They also believe that it is always God's will to heal. So if somebody has a broken leg, I am supposed to pray for them, and you should be going out in public and praying for people all of the time. So there was some victim shamey vibes going on, because if you pray for someone and you have faith and you're praying and they are not healed, then they must not have enough faith. Or maybe they have some unforgiveness, and that is why they are not receiving the healing that God so desperately wants to give them. They believe that God can give you gold teeth during worship if the vibes are really good. They believe in gold dust falling from the sky. If the anointing is really high, God might choose to drop some gold dust in a service, and they call those glory clouds. Some people, not all of them, so before the Bethel people come for me, some people believe in grave soaking, where you lay on the graves of dead prophets and you soak up their anointing from the ground. Some of the leaders thought that we never have to die, because if we are called to always heal people and it's always God's will, then why would we ever die? So they were in the news because they were trying to raise a little girl from the dead as well. That was like a whole BuzzFeed article and everything. So those are some of their core beliefs. There were quite a few leaders at Bethel who would speak at the schools, but the 2 main leaders are Bill Johnson, who was married to Benny Johnson, and Benny Johnson passed away from cancer in 2022. And he is kind of the head of the house. People call him Papa Bill. He has written books about bringing heaven to earth, and that is kind of his thing. He's very soft-spoken. People think he is very, very spiritual. Now, second, we have Chris Valton, and he is a bit witty. Like, he has a dry sense of humor, and people really like him. They think he's funny. He is the prophet of the house, so the prophetic is his entire shtick. So while Bethel is this very culty church out in California, there are other affiliated ministries that are very similar, and a lot of these ministers are friends. So we have Bill, and then we have Randy Clark. He has a supernatural school as well out in Pennsylvania. I think it's still going. There's Georgina and Winnie Banoff, who I interned at their school in Pennsylvania as well. They have a supernatural school. There was IHOP, which, if you guys have been following the International House of Prayer scandal, it's absolutely crazy. There was a lot of sexual stuff that came out, and basically all of IHOP is corrupt. And actually, my best friend did the school at IHOP, so she has stories for days as well. And then there's also the Bakers. So Heidi Baker and her husband, they live out in Africa, and I've heard some stories about them as well. So basically all of these ministries, I'm probably missing some of them, but all of these ministries are friends, and they do conferences together all the time where there's a lot of healing, impartation, where they'll like touch people and people fall down. And people travel and pay thousands of dollars to come and see these very anointed people. Now this brings us to Shawn Bolz. Shawn Bolz is the person who gave me the prophetic word about God giving me to my ex, and he was a part of this entire network. So he would go and do these conferences with all of them, and the scandal is that he was data mining, which is getting all of his information off of Facebook, because he was known for the prophetic, and he would call out people's addresses, family members, how many kids people had, and he had all of this information, but he was getting it off of Facebook. And this is getting long, so follow for the next part. I'm going to do a full just breakdown of this situation, and we are going to read Bethel's statement to the alumni, and they asked that people not share it. So even now, they are choosing to not be transparent, but we're gonna share it. So I am going to play a clip of that prophecy, and this happened way back in 2015. A lot has been happening the last few months, so I am going to play catch up a little bit, and then I'm going to let you know what the cult had to say. They released a statement, and it's insane. They even call him the iPad prophet because he gets all of his information based off of Facebook and the internet, and it is so proven. If you guys want a deep dive into this, there are so many YouTube videos that go over many examples that show that whenever he got it wrong, it's because it looked a certain way online. Like he would get the amount of kids someone had wrong, and it's because they only showed however many kids on Facebook. And there was this one crazy circumstance where he called out this woman and he asked her what slaughterhouse meant to her, okay? And she didn't know what that meant. So obviously he thinks he has some sort of word of knowledge, or that he is just trying to prove that he's really hearing from God. And she had no idea what he was talking about. Now, if you go and look up her name, there are 2 people in that area with that name, and the other woman lives on Slaughterhouse Lane or something like that. So it is just very proven that he is getting all of his words online. And while this is relatively known now, it was not known back in 2015. I had no idea. He was so well respected in these circles, and I was still drinking the Kool-Aid from Bethel. So while I was doing my 3rd year internship out in Pennsylvania, he came to visit, and he ended up calling out my ex. And I'm going to play a clip of the prophecy, but just know that everything he says can or could have been found on my public Facebook.
I saw 50, but I know that 50 is Jubilee year. There's something about God's giving you a Jubilee. What does that mean to you? Oh, your girlfriend's name is Jubilee. That's awesome. Well, God's giving you this girl. And when we ordered the food this morning, by the way, this is a huge advertisement in the midst of prophesying, and it's a prophetic advertisement. That Tomato Pie Cafe place is like level 10 awesome, and we've been eating there for the mornings, and it's like they've been bringing us food kindly enough, and they're amazing. But does she have something to do with the Tomato Pie Cafe? She works there, okay. Jubilee from Tomato Pie Cafe.
So that is the prophecy, and yes, I was working at Tomato Pie Cafe, and that was on my public Facebook. I had even made a post saying that I was so happy that I had been hired, I think a month previously, and then our relationship was all over Facebook because he was love bombing me like crazy, so we were posting about each other a lot. So there is nothing in that word that could not have been found on my Facebook. But obviously at the time, he was so esteemed in these circles that it did not even cross my mind that he could be conning people. I thought that he had the stamp of approval of all of these people that I really respected at the time, so I thought that he was 100% legit. So during our engagement, I was all about Ted, my ex, okay? I was all about him and thought he was great up until we got engaged, and then there were so many red flags that were coming up during the engagement, including him verbally abusing me and hitting my car a week before the wedding, and that was the first time that I had ever seen that side of him. And it snowballed from there. We ended up getting married because of this word from Shawn. I was convinced that this was God's will for my life. It felt very confirmed to be called out by one of the most esteemed prophets in these circles. So we ended up getting married, and he turned abusive immediately. He told me I wasn't allowed to go out to eat with my dad anymore. He would, trigger warning, he would pin me down, spit in my face, call me a whore, and then he eventually did strangle me twice, and it took till the second time for me to finally leave, because genuinely I was so convinced that this was God's will, that I was supposed to be with this man, and that it was my job as a Christian woman to forgive my husband for attacking me. And I could have been unalived because I really believed that this word was from God. I finally left this abusive marriage in 2020, and it was a total mind F to go to therapy and try to process, like, what does this mean? Because I really thought that this was from God, but I knew that I didn't want to be unalived. So I started to do some research, and I found that there were some articles in 2020 that were coming out from people saying that they suspected him of data mining and getting his information based off of Facebook. So this is something that I have been processing and kind of knowing that he is a con man for the last 5 years. And I started to talk about it maybe 6 months ago. I started to talk about it more, and things have just been blowing up and really coming out in the last couple months. I had made a video about Shawn, and I ended up posting it in the Bethel alumni group. So the culty ministry school that I went to, they have an alumni group on Facebook, and despite the fact that I do believe that Bethel is a cult, I still wanted to warn all of these people. So I posted one of my TikTok videos on there, and they were very upset that I would say this about Shawn, but a lot of people started to question it. And yeah, information just started to come out. These podcasters did an episode on it. They released some text messages from Bethel leadership, and it had been sent to me as well. I just didn't want to be the one to break the news. But essentially in these text messages, Chris Valton, the guy I talked about in my first video, he is admitting that he knew about this, and that Bethel had actually confronted him in 2020, and they chose to not warn anybody. And there is so much more to it than that, but that is the gist of the situation. Over the last month, I have received a lot of information that I did not know before, that this all runs so much deeper, that there is a pattern of cover up in these affiliated ministries. And I think that it is important to talk about that before I read Bethel's statement. That way you guys know the truth going into reading this statement that Bethel was essentially forced to put out because of PR, because people have been commenting on their social medias. But there is a pattern of behavior for covering up for things, and turns out that Shawn is not just guilty of falsifying prophetic words, he is also guilty of sexual misconduct. And I have been in contact with one of his victims, and Bethel, still chose to not warn anybody. So follow for the next part. I'm going to talk about a lot of the allegations that have been sent to me and what Bethel has known. I married a psychopath in a cult because a prophet named Shawn Bolz said that God was giving me to him. And a lot has been coming to light about Shawn. And turns out that it is not just false prophetic words that he is guilty of. There is a lot of sexual misconduct allegations that have come out about him as well. People were pretty upset when I referenced sexual allegations against Shawn a couple weeks ago, but guys, it is very confirmed. I'm not allowed to say what exactly happened because the victims are most likely going to come forward, and it is their story to tell, and I just respect their timing. But the reason that I did want to bring this up is that it's even confirmed in Bethel's statement, surprisingly. So Bethel released a statement, which I'm going to read the full statement in a bit, but I just want you to know that they do reference this sexual misconduct in their statement, and it confirms that they knew about it. So why is that important? Well, Bethel knew about the prophetic allegations, and they started to distance themselves from Shawn in 2020 after they had confronted him. The story that I have been told by numerous people is that Chris Valton went down to LA to confront Shawn. And he said, "Can you come back to Redding? I will get a group of people for you to prophesy over who you will not be able to look up in advance, and we will test if you are really prophetic." And Shawn declined. After that, Bethel started to really distance themselves from Shawn, taking down his books from the bookstore. But here is the thing. They also, I'm still a little fuzzy on the timeline of when Bethel figured it out, but they did know about these other allegations against him. And what is absolutely insane is that Bill Johnson, the head of Bethel, did a joint appearance with Shawn Bolz in, I believe, 2023 on TVN. So let's let that sink in. We know that Bethel knew that he was giving false words. Okay, they knew that in 2020. Now we also know that these allegations that are extremely serious, and Shawn has admitted to, I will get into that, which he has admitted to, Bethel knew about both of these things, and the leader of Bethel still chose to do a joint appearance promoting Shawn Bolz's book in 2023, 3 years later. I understand that there are a lot of people who still want to believe positive things about Bill Johnson and Bethel as a whole. I don't know how to take that fact other than something as sinister, and I will just leave it at that. But next, I am going to talk about something that happened between Jedediah Hartley and Bill Johnson. I've gotten Jedediah's permission to talk about this, and if you are not aware, Jedediah's dad is Bob Hartley. He was another big prophet in these circles. He was very similar to Shawn Bolz, that he would give out these very distinct prophetic words. And Jedediah actually called out his dad publicly and let everybody know that his dad had been getting stuff off of Facebook and online, and that he had been doing this Jedediah's entire life. And it's just very confirmed. He saw his dad do it. His dad asked other family members to be involved and help. And there is a situation where Jedediah tried to warn Bill Johnson for years, and there was a very lack of response from Bethel. So follow for the next part. I'm going to talk about a conversation and meeting that happened between Jedediah, Bob Hartley, and Bill Johnson. So there has been a lot coming out against this prophet, and people are finally starting to wake up and realize that this prophet had gotten all of his information based off of Facebook, and that he was getting details for people and calling it out to make him seem more credible. Currently, Bethel just released a statement about this entire situation, and I am going to read through that in the next part. Promise it's coming, guys. There is so much backstory that you have to know to truly grasp how insane their response is. One thing I want to stress is that Bethel has a history of covering things up for people in their circle. A lot of people have actually been writing me about Heidi Baker. If you guys have more stories of cover-ups of people in these circles, please email me or message me here. Email is easier, jubileedawns@gmail.com. Because I'm very interested to hear about just all of these cover-ups, because it seems like it was happening all the time. Next, I want to tell you about a cover-up that happened with Bob Hartley and his son Jedediah and Bill Johnson. So I have been in talks with Jedediah. His story is absolutely insane. He helped bring awareness to the fact that his dad was conning people for years. And what is absolutely crazy is that Jedediah had reached out to Bill Johnson because, listen, he grew up with him in these circles. You know, he was very familiar with these leaders. And he had reached out when he found out what his dad was doing. And he reached out to Bill and warned him and wanted to let him know that his dad's words were false and that he was a false prophet. Bill chose to continue to platform Bob Hartley after that. He continued to have him come and speak to the youth group, despite the fact that his own son is saying, listen, he is a false prophet, and Bill Johnson did not care enough to remove Bob Hartley from the Bethel circle or from the conferences. Bill Johnson and Bethel were aware of these allegations against Bob Hartley for years, guys. Absolutely crazy. And also, Bob Hartley used to ask Bill Johnson for a list of all of the attendees that were going to be at the conferences, and Bob Hartley would use that to look people up and get their information for his prophetic words. Later on, Jedediah found out that there were sexual allegations against his dad, and that his dad was taking advantage of women using the prophetic in a very bad way. I can't get into details on TikTok, but just very horrible stuff. So these victims had started reaching out to Jedediah and telling him their stories with his dad. So Jedediah had reached out to Bill Johnson and let him know what his dad was doing. And he kept saying, listen, you need to remove my dad from your ministry. You need to tell him that he is not allowed on the premises. He is not safe to be around women. Bill Johnson did not listen, and he continued to invite him after that. So then, after all of that happened, Jedediah was like, can we please have a meeting? Because his dad was in a really bad way. Like, his dad was really needing help as well for substances. So he thought that they were going to have this meeting where they were going to confront his dad and try to get him help and also remove him from ministry. So in Jedediah's mind, this is kind of like an intervention, and he still thought positively of Bill at this point. He just thought that Bill Johnson was a bit naive, which I think a lot of people kind of baby Bill. They act like, well, he's just naive. He just thinks the best of people. And there had been a conversation between Jedediah and other Bethel leaders, and they were saying, well, we just want to honor your dad. We don't want to make your dad look bad. And Jedediah was like, I'm not asking you to make my dad look good. Like, my dad is doing horrible things. You don't need to honor him, because Bethel is all about this culture of honor. Jedediah shows up to this meeting with his dad, and he thinks that this is going to be an intervention, like I said. So he walks in and he said the wildest thing happens. And what you need to know about the timing of this meeting is that Bill's wife, Benny, had passed away a couple months beforehand. So, his wife has just passed away, and Bob Hartley walks in and he starts prophesying over Bill Johnson, which Jedediah was like, it was crazy land. I was thinking, what is happening right now? So they are at this meeting to talk about his false prophecy, and immediately his dad starts to prophesy over Bill, telling him that he has essentially prophetic permission to date this younger woman. And Bill is touched by this word, which we know that he had been getting all of his information off of Facebook, and Bill knows this too, but for some reason this word means a lot to Bill, and there was no confrontation at all. It was just Bill receiving permission to date this younger girl publicly, which he ended up doing. So there was no accountability in that meeting, and he walked out of that meeting feeling like, what just happened? And realizing that maybe these people do not want to know the truth, or maybe they don't care as long as it benefits them. After pushing and pushing and pushing, they finally did remove his dad. But it took a lot. So why were they so adamant to protect someone that they knew was sexually abusing women? Why? I feel like this is very important to paint the picture of the cover-ups that are happening behind the scenes, because I have heard this situation, I've heard other situations with other ministers, the Bakers, and obviously we know what happened at IHOP, and there were so many cover-ups when it comes to IHOP. So next, I am finally going to read Bethel's statement, but I really felt like you guys needed to know all of this backstory to understand how ludicrous this statement is. I married a psychopath in a cult because a prophet named Shawn Bolz said that God was giving me to him, only to find out that he ended up getting all of my information off of Facebook and used that information to try to get me to trust his word. Bethel of Bethel Music has been aware of this since 2020, and all of these allegations have come out, and they have received a lot of criticism for not warning their congregation about Shawn, because they kind of just quietly quit him and started to remove his books and started to associate with him less, but they did not warn anybody about what Shawn was doing. And there was also sexual allegations that they did not warn anybody out about as well. So we are going to read their statement. They pretty much got pushed into a corner into releasing this, and it's insane. So let's read through it together. And just so you know, this is only for the alumni. So they are still not even making a statement towards their entire church, who very much trusted Shawn for many, many years. They are only releasing this to the alumni because it is the alumni that really stirred this up and caused this problem for them. Okay, here we go. Dear alumni, we know that this feels late for some of you. Sorry that this has taken so long. We are aware of the conversation happening regarding Shawn Bolz and our confrontations with him that took place more than 5 years ago. We have delayed in an effort to reflect our recollection accurately as the issues are important and complex. So just to start off, I think it's interesting that they're saying this took place more than 5 years ago. I feel like this is such a PR statement that they are trying to distance themselves from the situation, and them saying that they delayed in an effort to reflect our recollection accurately. You did not delay for 5 years for this reason. So to me, that is just an excuse, and they are trying to justify why they did not come forward. Shawn Bolz had ministered with us many times for many years and had a great impact on our house. We deeply valued and trusted him and appreciated his prophetic gift. Many of us have received important, accurate prophecies and words of knowledge from him prior to social media being so pervasive that we had great confidence in. So right here, they are doubling down on their stamp of approval on at least some of his prophetic words. I think they are going to distance themselves from his words of knowledge via Facebook, but they are backing him, and I think that they are trying to justify why they trusted him. Because a lot of people have criticized, like, where's y'all's discernment? How did you not discern that he was a fraud? And I think that they are trying to justify why they didn't see this coming or why they had faith in him, is they are saying that they had received accurate prophetic words previously, which in 2019, some significant concerns came to us from respected international leaders regarding irregularities in Shawn's words of knowledge gift that caused them to wonder if he had been using social media to generate them. We believe that these concerns and the evidence to support them were gathered and shared in good faith and out of concern for the global church. Their presentation of over a dozen words amongst hundreds that he had given was a small sample size, but regardless was validly concerning and needed to be addressed. For some of our team, the evidence felt conclusive, but for others, it was not. We did not have a consensus, but we were very concerned and sought clarity from him. To me, this continues to reiterate the idea that maybe he is a true prophet, because it says that this was a presentation of over a dozen words, but a small sample size. So I think that they are implying here, without saying it, that he has given hundreds of words, and who's to say if he really is a false prophet, because this is a small sample size. 2 of our leaders met with Shawn on 2 separate occasions about this. Chris flew down for his meeting with Shawn at Bill Johnson's request. So this is important because remember, Bill had that joint appearance with Shawn in 2023 on TBN. So this statement here proves that Bill knew about it, which, I mean, we can put 2 and 2 together, but it's confirmed that he knew about this in 2020. Our leaders also met with Shawn's board and shared the evidence and our concerns. Each time, Shawn absolutely denied using any social media in his words of knowledge or prophecies. Shawn still maintains that he never used social media in any words. And truthfully, this is crazy. And truthfully, unless something changes, only he and the Lord really knew what took place. If anyone is unconvinced if Shawn is guilty, please go look up videos where it shows exactly what he said and how it directly correlated to Facebook, and sometimes it was wrong, and it was wrong because it was portrayed differently on Facebook. It is so blatantly clear. I cannot imagine any person looking at the evidence and thinking that Shawn could even remotely be innocent of data mining, at least sometimes. So this statement saying, unless something changes, only he and the Lord really know what took place, that is such a cop-out. And I mean, I guess, yeah, how can we for sure know that someone is not hearing from God? They're essentially saying that they're okay with putting their head in the sand because can we ever really prove that someone didn't get something from God? And I think that they are saying this to protect themselves legally. We ended up in a stalemate without a satisfactory resolution of our concerns, without definitive proof. Okay, guys, without definitive proof, repentance, or a team consensus, and I think that that is the most important part of this, we made no public statement because we weren't sure. The leaders who previously investigated and gathered the evidence were, of course, free to do what they thought was best going forward. And this is why I thought it was important to tell you guys about the different leaders of Bethel in my initial video, because to me, what this is sounding like is that the leaders did not agree on what was right and what was wrong. And if I had to put my money on it, we have seen those text messages from Chris, and he has also commented on his Instagram saying, listen, I want nothing to do with Shawn. I would bet money that Chris Valton thinks that he is a con, wants nothing to do with him. And I think that Bill is probably the one who's saying, how can we ever really know? Because we know that Bill Johnson has a history of covering up abuse and these false prophets. And who is the head of the house? Bill Johnson. Next, they are going to get into the other allegations, so follow for the next part. I married a psychopath in a cult because a prophet named Shawn Bolz said that God was giving me to him, and my ex literally almost ended up unaliving me, and Bethel knew that he had been giving false words since 2020, and they finally released a statement as to why they didn't say something sooner. The first half of their statement in the last video, so let's continue on because they are about to address the sexual allegations against Shawn. Around this time, one of Shawn's employees made allegations concerning inappropriate behavior and an unacceptable work environment. And guys, I have talked to one of the victims of Shawn, and this is the most downplaying it language I have ever heard. Though Shawn was not and is not under our authority, one of our leaders found another impacted former team member and went to Shawn and confronted him on those issues over several difficult conversations and admonished him that this behavior was completely unacceptable and that he should take responsibility. So again, this is a very PR legal language to say that he was not under our authority. Okay, just because he is not under your authority in your house doesn't mean that you shouldn't protect people. You guys, like I said, this is why I thought that it was important to go over the history of Bethel and these circles. They're all so adjacent, guys. They all like promote each other constantly. So it is your responsibility, in my opinion, to warn people if you know that someone is being predatory. That's crazy. Okay, so Shawn indicated to us that the behaviors that had taken place had stopped. So he admitted that they happened because he is saying that they stopped. Though we are not experts, these behaviors seem to fit the descriptions of sexual harassment, to say the least, and a hostile work environment as commonly taught in HR training, and had potential legal ramifications. We recommended that they take action in seeking a remedy through the justice system, such as the labor board or the courts, as there was no movement from Shawn to address the past situations, and we had done what we could with our limited level of knowledge we had at the time. We spoke to his board regarding this area of concern. And I know that Bethel here is acknowledging that there was one or two people that were affected. It was more than that, and it's all going to come out in a bit, but it is not my place to say what happened. But just know that chalking this up to HR training violation of harassment in the workplace, I think that is definitely diminishing it, and for them to act like it is not their place to warn people and say, listen, we did what we could with the limited level of knowledge that we had. You had knowledge because he admitted it to you, because he told you that the behaviors had stopped. So your knowledge was not that limited. They go on to say that Romans 13 teaches us that God has placed civil leaders in place as ministers of God for the kinds of issues his former team member brought to us. Furthermore, their experience was absolutely important and personal, and as such was their story to tell, not ours, and to take action if they desired. This is the general context to which Chris was speaking in the text messages that were posted on social media. So now we finally have definitive confirmation that those text messages that have been floating around are from Chris. And in my opinion, this is just them trying to Bible their way out of it, because they are ignoring other verses that talk about speaking out against false prophets. So they are not going to quote those because those don't fit their narrative. Shawn was a trusted guest minister who often spoke on our platform. If Shawn had worked for us or was truly officially under our covering, the situation would have been handled much differently. We would not have just appealed to Shawn, we would have required a comprehensive and righteous response. Whether related or not, shortly after we addressed our concerns, it appeared that Shawn took steps to adjust how he operated. Operated in words of knowledge. He just recently spoke to some of these changes that he has made, which can be found on his website, which I spoke about this recently. If you go to Shawn's website, he writes that his ministry has created boundaries for his prophetic words. So he is no longer giving words of knowledge. So he is not doing addresses, phone numbers, and all of those like crazy tricks that he used to do. His words of or his prophecies are super vague. They're basically like, you are going to have a great year and have a lot of joy. So my question to Bethel and to Shawn would be, so was God all about addresses and phone numbers and now God isn't? Are we telling God what to tell us? Because in my opinion, what Shawn wrote on his website about how he is now operating in the prophetic is essentially an admission of guilt. That he's like, okay, I never did anything wrong, but I'm not doing it anymore. In the absence of clarity about both what really happened with the words of knowledge and having addressed the issues with his former team members and found his response lacking, we made the decision to step back from our ministry connection. This meant, 1, we did not have him ministering to our people or movement or have his materials in our store, though we missed some up until recently. 2, we communicated our concern, confusion, and his denials to other leaders who initially raised concerns about the words of knowledge with us, as well as leaders closely connected to Shawn, and made the evidence available for them to make their own decision. We firmly admonished and warned him, and he responded by making some changes in both of these areas. So before they're saying, we can never really know, and they're kind of trying to play on the doubt that he actually did anything wrong. But here it's saying they firmly warned him, and he responded by making changes in these areas. So the fact that you are still clinging to the shred of argument that, but maybe we're wrong. I don't think so. 4, we made it clear that global leaders were concerned and watching closely. Follow for the next part, and I'm going to read the last part of this insane statement and give my final thoughts. So I am reading Bethel's response to these allegations, and this is part 3 of reading their statement, and it is wild. 1 Timothy 5:20 says to publicly rebuke leaders who continue to sin. We weren't entirely clear what was happening in the words of knowledge and were unaware of the scope of his issues with his former team members, but believed that he had changed his behavior and the work environment going forward after our confrontations. So we did not make a public statement. In the past, we have only brought public admonishment to those outside of our organization in cases where there was no acknowledgement or change. We empathize with those who are confused and disappointed over the situation. We feel the same. This is a tender, confusing, and complex situation. As it stands, our trust in Shawn is still unrepaired. Having privately admonished him, this letter is only intended to clarify the journey that we were on and the steps that we have taken, given that it is now a wider conversation. We receive and value the feedback that our actions may have been too subtle and difficult to decipher, and that it would have been more helpful to at least openly acknowledge that we were creating distance with Shawn due to our concerns. They may have been too subtle. Wow. We acknowledge that we have more to learn in handling situations outside of our staff environment with greater clarity, and have been working over the last several months to standardize procedures for hearing and responding to concerns in order to create an even healthier church environment. Even healthier is crazy, because I have some stories and Bethel is not a healthy environment. Words of knowledge are a significant and important element in conveying the heart of God, demanding high levels of integrity, accountability, and responsibility, and our work environments and team relationships must be full of holiness, respect, appropriate behavior, safety, and such that they reflect the joy of the glory of God. Guys, that was one sentence. So I just want y'all to know that I was confused because that was the longest sentence of my life. We pray that the Holy Spirit brings wisdom, humility, comfort, and instruction to each of us, Bethel leadership. Now remember, this is not for everybody. This is just for the Bethel alumni that they released this statement, which is really crazy because, like I said, all of these ministers, they all work together. And if you go to Shawn Bolz's social media pages, he still has tons of people drinking the Kool-Aid and thinking that he is wonderful and do not know about these very serious allegations against him or the false prophetic words. And he is still selling prophetic workshops, and Bethel is choosing to still not warn people who are in these circles. And it's a very large circle, guys, okay? This is a very large network of ministry, and they are choosing to only release this to the alumni because the alumni has been outraged. One of my biggest takeaways from that is that Bethel leaders do not agree how this should have been handled. It seems like some were fully convinced that he was conning people, and some were like, well, who knows? And what I would say is anybody who was saying, well, who knows, side eye. And I know I posted about this yesterday, but I was surprised at how disappointed I felt by their statement. And I have to remind myself, Jubilee, they're literally conning people. And I sometimes forget that this is such a culty environment. This is not like a normal church, so I should not be surprised. But anybody who is not willing to publicly rebuke Shawn, I find to be pretty much just as guilty. Or here is my big conspiracy, which I do not think is far-fetched at all, is I've been hearing a lot of things about other people in these circles. Obviously, we had the IHOP scandal. Now we have Shawn Bolz. Now we know about these cover-ups from Bill Johnson, and I have received many DMs regarding Heidi Baker and her husband and crazy cover-ups that have happened out at Harvest and Iris. I think that they probably all have dirt on each other, all of them. And I think that they don't want to publicly rebuke somebody because if they do that, who knows what that person might say about them. And if we all start to turn on each other, well, what are you going to say about me? And I think that that is why they are kind of choosing to stay out of it. I think that they kind of all have each other's backs. And listen, if you had good intentions, you would warn people about these very serious. Sorry, I got a phone call. You would warn people about these crazy allegations that are very proven, especially the ones that Shawn admitted to. We are not even talking about unfounded allegations at this point. We are talking about things that he has admitted to. So if you are not warning people, I have some thoughts that you are probably hiding some things as well. And honestly, all of this is going to come to light.